Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Great topic for you today. Let's get right to it. Serious. What real life story is scarier than any horror movie? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The Attack of the Dead Men, 1915. A band of Russian soldiers in modern day Poland charged the field after being gassed with bromine and chlorine. The gas ruined their lungs and heavily damaged their skin, giving them a nightmarish appearance, frightening their German adversaries. School shooting. I remember just wanting to cry and hiding with the rest of my class. They got the person and no shots were fired. Was mentally not all there, but the anticipation of just waiting was terrifying. USS Indianapolis shark attack. The worst shark attack in recorded history. It lasted 4 days, and up to 150 men died from the shark attacks alone, but many more died and were then eaten by sharks. Of the 1,200 men on the boat, only 300 lived. The Holocaust. It doesn't get any scarier. Imagine a whole portion of the population, your friends, neighbors, etc., just being rounded up and taken away, never to be seen again. And everybody just shrugging it off like they had it coming, or, well, at least it's not me. Not to speak of what actually happened to them once they reached the concentration camps. And many of the people working there weren't even monsters, just bureaucrats whose daily business happened to be murdering innocent people by the thousands. Sometimes I get why people deny it ever happened. It's so scary it's hard to believe. But then again, it's more scary than any horror story than even the sickest mind could come up with. There was a disappearance where a little girl and her older sister and cousin were walking home at night. They kept teasing and bullying the little girl and locked her out of the house. Eventually, she walked back into town to call her parents on a payphone. The parents got a call, but it was from a strange man who said he was with their daughter, and the parents should come pick her up. Witnesses say they saw a little girl in the phone booth with a random man. The parents came to the phone booth, but the girl and man were gone. They never found the little girl, and the case is still unsolved. Just a sad story all around. Can't even begin to imagine the guilt the older sister and cousin felt. Well, that's just terrible. It's a game that siblings and family shouldn't play. The story of Nico Colias, a college football player, thought he and a friend were going to meet up with 2 women. Instead, they were abducted and tortured for 40 hours, all because of a teammate. They were beaten, bloody, and possibly even sexually assaulted, if I recall correctly. The Kiss nightclub fire here in Brazil. There was a fire in a nightclub during a college party on January 2013, where 242 people died. Most of them were between 18 and 28 years old, and students from Santa Maria's University. It is the second biggest fire tragedy from Brazil, and the third biggest fire in a nightclub in the world. A band was playing, and the vocalist lit up a fiery artifact, which caused the foam from the ceiling to get caught on fire and started the tragedy. The reaction of the foam burning up expelled the same gas used in the concentration camps during the Holocaust. The majority of the victims were found in the bathrooms, because the nightclub only had one exit, and it was really dark inside, so people saw the bathroom lights and thought it was an exit. It's been 10 years since the tragedy, and no one was punished. Some politics were protected. The only trial was suspended, and the responsibilities are free. Last week's Netflix released a series named The Endless Night about the case, and it's the most heartbreaking thing I ever watched. The first 2 episodes, where it shows the day of the tragedy and the families trying to find their sons and daughters, are soul-crushing. I cried on every 5 episodes. My dog nearly got grabbed when out on a walk. We were walking through a usually well-lit area, but for some reason on this night, most of the streetlights were out. This was at about 9 p.m. during the winter, so it was already dark. I wasn't too worried, as we'd been walking this path for years and never had a problem. It had cameras, but not sure if they ever worked. There was any house directly facing onto this path. Walkways and cars couldn't drive straight through, as it was all bollards. So a car has to drive up to either side and has to go the long way around on the main road to get to the other side. Basically, This white van had stopped as far as it could go on the other side and stopped, kept its headlights and stuff on, and it was as if the driver was staring at us from the inside. I got the creeps, and just as I went to turn around and walk back the way I came, the lights went out, and I heard a door being slammed shut, and saw someone race toward me. Now, I'm not someone who likes the gym in school or likes to run, but in that moment I felt like Usain Bolt. My dogs aren't too big. They're two Jack Russells, just a bit taller than your ankles, so it wasn't going to be hard to grab them. They were running along like it was a big game we were playing. I didn't stop till I hit the main road, where there were loads of cars around. I ran and hid under the bridge because I was scared they'd follow me home. After what felt like eternity, I felt okay enough to quickly get home, my head darting in every direction a car could drive. I went slightly longer way that went along more streets just in case anyone was watching. I got home, but my mom and her boyfriend weren't in from work yet, so I sat shaking and trying not to have a panic attack. I was only 18 when this happened, so in the moment, I wasn't even thinking to call someone. I couldn't think, my mind just wasn't working. I did end up seeing the van on my way home. I had noticed a logo on the side when it first pulled up on the other side. Some sort of work logo. I couldn't quite make out. We saw on social media a day or two later about people in vans going around and lifting dogs out of the gardens when their owners weren't around. So it's possible it could have been the same people. I'm 20 now and haven't walked that way at night since. I don't do a lot of night walks anymore unless it's needed. My mom's boyfriend does most of them, or my older brother. Harrison O'Keen survived being trapped underwater in a sunken ship by staying in a small air pocket in one of the rooms for 2.5 days. Wow. He witnessed the water take several other crew members as the ship sank and ended up being the only survivor. Floating in a pitch-black sunken room in freezing cold ocean water, barely any oxygen, grabbing onto random items to keep his head above the surface. He reported being able to hear the ocean and ship creaking as well as the sounds of things swimming around, eating his dead crewmates. A glowing old man dressed in white with a long beard used to appear at the foot of my bed every once in a while. He would stand there and watch me for a few minutes and then slowly fade away. I was around 9 or 10 at the time. I never felt afraid of him, and he began to show up less and less as I grew older until I never saw him again. Not sure if this is paranormal, but I used to have a dream about these mannequins every single night as a young kid. It was always set in an empty area with one diamond-shaped shop which had glass pane windows all around it. There would be a path leading out from the opening of the shop to 2 open steel gates. I would start inside the shop, and as soon as I tried to move, the mannequins would wake up and run towards me. As I tried to escape, I would run and smash through the glass pane walls to try and get to the iron gates. The mannequins would be armed with softballs, like the sort the clown juggles in the circus, and would throw them at me as soon as I left the building. As soon as one hit me, the dream would end and I would wake up. I'm not sure how long I had this dream for, but it lasted maybe a month and I would never reach the gates in time. I remember the last time I had that dream, it started exactly the same way, but there was a man with me, maybe in the mid-30s or something as well. We ran out together, and as the mannequins started firing, the man showed me that I could pick them up off the floor and throw them back. As soon as the juggling balls hit the mannequins, they would disappear. And finally, when they were all gone, we ran outside the iron gates, and the dream ended. I never had that dream ever again after that. Dream things are always fascinating to me. Maybe not terrifying or scary, but, when you're in it, it's legit, so cool. I like that one. Kind of happy ending. When I was little, like between 2 and 4, whenever I would go to my grandparents' house, I would always see a lady in a purple dress sat on the bed into their spare bedroom. I was never frightened of her and would always wave at her, and she would smile and wave back. When I'd mention this to my grandparents or my mom and ask they'd always be super freaked out because obviously there wasn't actually anyone there. I'm now 18 and haven't seen this lady since I was about 5. I can still remember what she looked like though, and my nan always brings it up whenever there's a conversation about spooky stuff. My granddad, however, is a massive skeptic and thought it was just my little kid imagination. Well, a few weeks ago, when at my grandparents' house, my 3-year-old sister stopped playing and started to stare straight into space, waving at something with a big grin on her face. When my nan asked her what she'd been doing, she replied, "I'm waving at the lady." She didn't elaborate on this and just went back to playing, and we didn't ask a question, but it's safe to say everyone was royally effing weirded out. Coincidence? Maybe. But it's a lot scarier now that I might not be the only one to have seen this lady. Well, I thought it was scary then, but not too scary. I decided to look out the window in my mom's room. Outside on the sidewalk was a pitch-black figure with completely white eyes just staring at me. I looked at it for a long time, but eventually looked away. When I looked back, it was gone, like it was never there. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I just kept looking. Would it stay there forever? Would it attack me? Or would it just vanish in front of my eyes? Me and my cousin Ashley walked into our other cousin Tiana's room. We were looking for toys to play with. I went over to the dollhouse and tried to pick it up, but couldn't, so I called Sarah over to help me. I looked up at her and she was still by the doorway, looking past me at Tiana's porcelain doll collection on my left. I asked her what was wrong, but then she screamed so effing loud I told her to shut up. I looked at the dolls, and one of them had their arms up and flew off the shelf, breaking into pieces. Sarah ran down the hall, still screaming, toward Tiana's parents. I was scared about the fact that I was going to get blamed for it all, and also get lectured by Tiana for months. Now that I remember this, I am scared to shit by dolls. Okay, so this happened a couple weeks ago. So my grandpa just died on May 7th, the day after his birthday, so the week or so after I was in show choir, and we were dancing and getting ready for a concert, and out of nowhere I got the intense smell of smoke and weed. The smell of my grandpa's house. My uncle smokes weed for medical reasons, and my grandpa stopped smoking cigarettes but smoked something out of a pipe, and that made his house have a unique smell of smoke and weed. I got used to it. I had to, because every summer when my parents and I go visit family in California, that's where we'd spend most of the time. And yeah, I got the smoke smell in my nose, and I didn't think much of it till I got home. The next day, I'm in orchestra, and the teacher is making us play the song we're learning, memorized, and standing to get ready for our next concert. I'd put the music stand next to me, so I couldn't see the music. My grandpa was also very obsessed with Elvis, and even looked like him. Out of the corner of my eye, I see this guy who looked exactly like Elvis, standing next to me. I got this feeling that it wasn't Elvis, and then I looked next to me, and the guy was gone. I don't believe in the paranormal at all, but those two things freaked me out. And my two conclusions to explain these things are, maybe a kid in my choir's class just smelled like my grandpa's old house, and the music stand was messing with me. But no one was around when I got the smell, and I was looking at the back of the music stand on the side of me when I saw him, and it freaked me out. I used to get certain feelings about future events that would turn out to be correct. It was never stuff that was important, just little mundane details of everyday life. It doesn't happen nearly as much anymore, but the last time I got a feeling like that, I was starting to walk to work and thought, I'm going to feed a squirrel a bit and of my granola bar, and then I'll see Deltron, one of the neighborhood cats, and pet him for a couple minutes. And yes, that scenario happened exactly the way I thought it would. When I was a child, I saw a bunch of little gnome-like creatures scamping around near a ravine not far from my house. I saw them so many times, usually while riding with my car with my parents on our way home, that we named them crawlers because of the way they moved. My parents and I remember me being epileptic upon seeing them. Years later, I learned about Mandgizi, an indigenous legend common to where I live. I'm not the only one who's seen them in the ravines and valley system in the Toronto area either. There's newspaper reports and legends of sightings of them in this city as old as the city itself. Even though this was more than 30 years ago, I still get uneasy if I drive by where I saw them. I get flashbacks to incidents where I saw them. I mean, it was more scary when I was younger, But one night I was upstairs in my media room playing games or watching a movie or something. I was probably like 9. All of a sudden, I see my brother's room light turn on and the door start to crack open. He was 7 or 8, so he had gone to bed earlier. As the door starts to open, I see his head pop out, but only like he was peeking out the door. I had said something like, "What's up, Michael?" But he just stared at me. I again was like, "Michael, are you okay?" Still just a blank stare. He then quietly retreated into his room, closed the door, and turned the light off. I was like, what the f? So I went and checked on him, opened the door, and turned the light on. He was fast asleep on his bed. I even called his name again, and no response. He was never one to sleepwalk, and has never done it since, to my knowledge. I'm about 20 now, and it still gives me big chills. One of my earliest memories is of me waking up in the middle of the night in my parents' bed and looking out their window to see a man in all black watching me from under a streetlight. Not too long after that, my parents got a divorce. My mom stayed in that house and my dad moved in with grandma for a bit. One night I was staying with him at my grandma's when I woke up in the middle of the night again and saw the same man under yet another streetlight staring at me. From then on, out every time one of my parents moved, I would see him. The last time I saw him when I was 12 or 13, after my dad moved into an old country house. However, he just recently bought a new house in January. I haven't seen my old childhood friend yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he decided to visit. He still doesn't really scare me, though. Everyone I tell about him gets the heebie-jeebies. One time, when I was around 13 or 14 years old, I was with my family in California. We were driving down a highway, and to the left side, there were a bunch of trees. Then, there was a small opening, and that is where we saw a plane. This plane was just hovering off the ground and did not move. It just stayed there. It was probably a good few feet off the ground, too. I remember all of us looking at each other, being like, "Did you just see that?" We then turned around, and it was gone, and we did not see any planes in the sky. It is still one of the strangest things I've ever seen, and anytime we bring it up, we all get the same goosebumps as we did when we first saw it. Also, we checked, and there were no airports around us.